The conversation continues. Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Dismuke, freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures RPG, lead writer on Captain's Log, the solo RPG, and also a writer for Star Trek fiction. In addition to a bunch of other stuff I'm working on, you can always go to michaeldismuke.com to see more about current and future projects. And of course, this show is not a show unless I have my amazing ally with me, Jim Johnson.
Hey everybody, Jim Johnson. I am the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG, the Captain's Log solo RPG, and a bunch of other stuff that you'll be seeing coming up in the coming months and years. I'm also a fiction writer, just like Michael, just science fiction fantasy mostly. You can find my stuff on scribeandeddy.com. I'm in the works of updating that website, partly because I've been prodded by Michael to do it. So I need to get off my butt and update that website, but go check it out. I've got a bunch of novels out there, got a bunch of series, other random sundry stuff. So, check it out as you can. But in the meantime, we're here to talk about Star Trek RPGs and RPGs in general, storytelling with RPGs. And we have an amazing guest here tonight. I'm sure you've seen his stuff on YouTube. Who can't have seen it, especially if you've been keeping an eye on Star Trek Second Edition, because he's done some fantastic videos for Star Trek Second Edition. So without more ado, I'm going to have him introduce himself. And then we have 2 questions for you that you can answer after you do your little intro and your plugs. What is your favorite Star Trek series? And who is your favorite Star Trek captain? So without more ado, Guy, please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for that. Good grief. Yes, hello, my name is Guy, and I run the YouTube channel Off My Bridge, which is my new Star Trek Adventures 2 YouTube channel. I used to run the YouTube channel How to Be a Great GM for many, many, many years, and that has now come to a close. I think I've said as much as I can on that one, but the channel is still active. You can go and check that out. And I've written several books on how to tell good stories within the role-playing space, and you can find those on my website, www.greatgamemaster.com. And yeah, that's pretty much me at the moment. Star Trek Adventures 2 is my new favorite role-playing system because it's so narrative. I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that. To answer your question, what is my favorite Star Trek series? Oh, it's so tough. It is so tough because it kind of drifts as I watch them, because currently we're watching Deep Space Nine, with the caveat of we don't skip any episodes, even the episodes where we're going, oh, I remember this episode. Do we really have? Yes, we are doing this. We are watching them all. So you know what? I'm actually going to say it's the Next Generation. I'm going to say it's the Next Generation.
Okay.
And that's it. That's my final answer. It's the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine and Voyager. Wait, what? Yeah, Next Generation.
All right.
And Captain, I mean, I feel like I need to have a top 10 favorite captains, but yeah. I'm going to once again go with Picard on this one. Because I think that he represents the greatest turmoil that the Prime Directive brings. I feel of all of the captains, he was the one who struggled the most with the Prime Directive, and stuck to it the most as well, in my opinion. But
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's a nice perspective. Yeah, cool. Very nice.
Good choices. I love the agony over picking a series. I mean, at this point, we've got 13 series. We've got such a wealth of Star Trek now to pick from, and they're all so good in their own ways,
Absolutely. And the challenge is that you go, okay, well, what if you choose Lower Decks? Does that count as an official series? Does that count as your favorite animated series? Right?
It's official. It's official. Sorry. The crossovers like Garrett Wang and Bobby Duncan McNeil coming into it. It's official.
I mean, I don't deny Lower Decks is absolutely phenomenal. But it's like Picard season 3. It's only good because of preceding seasons and series, which you almost have to watch in order to really get the most out of Lower Decks or Picard 3.
Yeah. That's great literature, though. Think about how many book series are like that, though.
Absolutely.
Right.
It is. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Well, one of the reasons we had you on the show today, Guy, I've been watching you for years. I've been enjoying your narrative style. I've enjoyed your I've watched your videos about how to be a good storyteller and a GM. We know that's one of the things you mentioned. But the reason I had you on the show is because of the amazing announcement that hit me. At first, I was freaking out. I'm telling you right now, I was freaking out. I was like, no way. And that was that the Great GM channel was closing, that you were wrapping it up. But then you gave us some relief in that same video. Why don't you tell us about the big change that's happening and really what motivated it?
Yes. So How to Be a Great GM will still be there in perpetuity or until YouTube crumbles and disappears. But when you look at the fundamentals of storytelling, after 1,000 videos on the subject, you kind of have covered almost every aspect of it, right? And then there's just nuances left. And even the nuances, I got to a point where I was like, okay, this is a nuance of a nuance of a nuance. And this kind of concept is such high concept storytelling, or is such a niche thing. It's really only applicable 1 in 50 or 60 adventures. So we got to a point where we're like, okay, you know what? There is the amount of support for game masters in the role-playing space has dramatically changed in the last 5 years. If you look at the new other role-playing systems that are releasing new rule sets this year in 2024, 25 editions, the DM support is way more on storytelling and on that sort of thing than it is on rules handling and other minutiae there. So the focus has come back to, hey, let's help DMs tell good stories. Let's help game masters run better stories. So the focus is, there's more support there now. So the original premise of the channel was, how do we help other people become great storytellers and game masters as a result? Well, there are a certain number of things you can do, and then thereafter it just is practice, practice, practice. So yeah, we got to a point where we're like, wow, we're head scratching. What is next? What's the next episode? What's the next episode? And then my partner said, well, hey, what do you want to do? What makes you excited again? And I said, well, I really want to do a Star Trek channel, because Star Trek Adventures 2 came out. And full disclosure, because the evidence is to be found on the internet, when Star Trek Adventures first came out, I was not a fan. And I feel like I was not a fan because I was a huge fan of the previous system for Star Trek. And so when Star Trek Adventures 1 came out, it was like, it's not doing what the previous one did. It's not better. It's confusing. It's this, it's that, it's the next thing. That was my opinion at the time. I'm out, right?
Fortuitous is, I did not have you on the show at that time.
Right, exactly. But this was what, 2017, 2018, somewhere around there. Captain's Log came out, and I thoroughly enjoyed Captain's Log. It was one of those experiences where as a content producer, you are able to literally play with yourself in front of an audience, and they're enjoying it and they're going along for the ride. And we had a lot of great interactions with the audience on Captain's Log. So when Star Trek Adventures 2 came out, I got sent a copy saying, hey, what do you think about this one? And I was like, oh my goodness. And I have used the word genius to describe the system multiple times because of the things that are in it, which may very well have been in the original version, but I didn't see them, or I didn't connect them in the way that I'm now looking at them going, oh, wow, right?
Jim, I know Jim's loving hearing this, because I know he put so much work into streamlining it with the team and Nathan Dowdell.
Yeah, I know Nathan will appreciate hearing this too. I think over 8 years, we've learned so much in terms of RPG design, and not just like RPG design, but like visually how to present stuff, right? Like how do you put this stuff on a page and make people grok it, right, without getting into the weeds, and adding flow charts and step blocks and stuff like that, just to make it much more streamlined. So I'm really thrilled to hear that it worked for you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so the opportunity to go and make a YouTube channel just on Star Trek, I was like, yes, this is it, because I've been a Star Trek fan since it was legally allowed on the television system when I was young. I've been a fan since then.
And I'm curious too, if you want to, I like knowing people's journey into this realm. You putting yourself on YouTube, and was your background always RPG? I mean, I'm not going to ask your day job unless you want to tell it, but I always like to know, like, who's coming into the RPG arena, because you have such a professional, polished format. Me and Jim always warn new players, like, don't think you have to have this level of production to enjoy the game. We sometimes can intimidate people because we do live play also, right? And so I kind of want to know, what was your pathway into the RPG arena? You mentioned you played other Star Treks before. Did you play other games? And then again, your high level of professionalism, where does that come from? Is that just something you home grew?
No, I was lucky. The short answer is I grew up in South Africa, where there were no role-playing clubs or stores. There was nothing. The very first rule system that we were playing was Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition, which we had to send a postal check. They don't exist anymore, right? Because this is before the internet, to the US, to a bookstore, and say, we would like to buy this book, and then wait 3 months, and then mysteriously the book would arrive because we did the right financial conversions, and so it was incredibly isolated.
Wow.
And we had Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Edition, and then the West End versions of Star Wars and the D6 system. Those were the only two role-playing systems, and we only had the basic 3 D&D books and the 1 West End, and that was it. So the idea of pre-made campaigns and pre-existing worlds and adventure modules, we didn't have a clue that these even existed, because we didn't have a bookstore that we could wander in and look at all these things. So from the age of 13, we were making up our own worlds and running our own adventures and figuring out what worked and what didn't work blind, just based on what came naturally and what worked. And we failed so hard so many times.
Failure is learning. Failure is learning.
It absolutely is. And we had a DM who would have these files with all of their plans for every adventure scenario, and they refused to DM with us because we would go, wait, we've just emptied the sewer of kobolds. Can we take over the sewer? Can we turn that into our lair? Hey, what wood should we use for a door? And we would just role play and have fun. And the DM's like, none of this is my planned stuff. You're not following my planned route. I'm out. Which immediately taught me, don't plan. The player's going to do what they're going to do, right? So cut forward, there was one role-playing convention in South Africa. One in the whole country. And I attended that, and they used to do competitive DMing and competitive play, which
what's that?
For a long time, I was like, okay, well, this is just what you do at conventions. You go and you compete to see who's the best DM and who's the best player. And they had a whole scorecard, and the DMs would get rated by their players, and the scores would be calculated. And at the end of the weekend,
I would die.
They'd give out awards. All right, the top GM is this, and da. And for a couple of years, once I started attending the convention, I just kept coming first as the top GM. And it was nice initially, but then one event I was signing up, and this youngster who couldn't have been more than 18 said, oh, you're signing up to GM? Well, I'm not even going to bother then.
See, that's exactly what I was worried about when you're telling the story.
Exactly. And so immediately I said, right, scratch my name off the list. I'm not doing this because anyone can do it. And everyone went, no, not everyone can do it. And I said, yes, but you can. It's the fun. There's some basics of storytelling. There's some things. These are the things. And the only reason why that came across, and this ties into my occupation, was I studied film at university, and I spent the first part of my life as a script writer and a TV director. So I had a lot of the script writing rules, if you like, in my head,
I love
which
that.
I just assumed everyone knew. And people didn't know because they didn't study filmmaking. They studied being a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, where some of those fundamentals don't come through. So because of that, I said, okay, I'm going to make a YouTube channel. YouTube was the sort of thing. In South Africa, internet was still very weird. You got to remember it was banned up until very much into the 90s, this whole control of information stuff. So it was this new space. And YouTube was new, and we said, okay, well, we can now translate stuff onto computer and stuff. And we made a couple of episodes, and by sheer luck, they went viral.
Wow.
And that just catapulted the whole thing. And then I made a very curious life choice to go and live and work in Japan, and discovered that my sensibilities were not compatible with the Japanese employers' sensibilities, and became jobless in Japan and said, well, I'm going to do this YouTube thing full time. And
have you ever documented that story? I mean, that's such an amazing cross-cultural gaming humanities story there.
Well, I mean, it's just the path that I followed. I was really lucky to have the opportunities to do what I wanted to do. It's not all glory. There are twice in my life I've been homeless, where it's a case of, okay, I have nowhere to sleep tonight because I don't have rent money, I don't have a job, I don't have anything. Right. So
you should be writing the screenplay of your own life, dude.
No, please. Because I would always get lucky, and a friend would one time a friend literally phoned me out of the blue and said, hey, how you doing? I'm like, I'm not so great. I'm on a curb figuring out where to sleep tonight. And he's like, oh, well, come and stay in my apartment. And, I've always been that sort of lucky in that kind of way.
What a success story. I mean, and then now you're paying it forward, kind of helping other people.
Well, I love helping people have those moments of clarity where something that seems impossible, and they suddenly go, oh, this can happen? And you're like, yes, welcome to the world of creating these stories. No one has ever done this before, and it's yours. And and with role playing, you are living that, and that becomes a memory which you will have for the rest of your life if you've done it properly. So what greater gift, right? Than doing that. So yeah. Anyway.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear that. That's so great to hear that, Michael. Right? Because Guy, we baked that concept into Captain's Log and then carried it forward even further into second edition. Like, I know it was already there by and large. Nathan wrote it into first edition. It was just kind of hard to tease it out, right? Because it was just kind of all over the place, and there were a lot of developmental constraints on that first edition book just to get it out in time for Gen Con, right? But we've had time over the last several years to refine it. But I remember, Michael, you and I talking about that extensively heading into the development of Captain's Log, that we really wanted it to be a tool to enable people to be creative, right? And we didn't have I'll be transparent, we had no idea what to expect from the market when we threw it out there, because no one had been asking for a solo Star Trek RPG, and there weren't really that many solo RPGs out there yet, especially not one for a major IP.
Right.
And so we were like, let's see what happens. And people were like, what is this? But the social media response, like the people who've been posting on social media consistently have been like, I've always wanted to be creative. I was never encouraged to be creative. I never had the tools to be creative. All of a sudden I got this book and you helped me connect the dots, and now they're off creating cool content. And for me, like, I love to read Star Trek fiction, whether it's professionally written or fan written. And it's like, oh yeah, this is me. This is a tool for me to get more stuff in front of my face, and I love it. Michael, I know we talked about this at length on the channel.
Yeah, I think, and I did a lot of research, because when I had to do the Captain's Log as lead writer, there was nothing out there in the way of major IPs. I did find smaller IPs. I found one pagers. I probably I watched a lot on the internet. I probably listened to a lot of your videos about it. There was another Trevor, his last name Duvall. Trevor Duvall. I don't know if you've seen him. He's Me, Myself, and Die is his channel. He's come on the show too. I did all this research, and my biggest takeaway, and some people have complained about it, some people have cheered it, is that I felt that by the time you finish playing solo RPG, you should have journaled yourself a story. And some people have actually called it, hey, this is more of a journaling book than no, it's what you make of it. You can make it hardcore RPG or you can make a journal. But my point was that since age 15, for me, I've been writing down every story I've ever played with my team. And I always took notes on it, and time 20 years later had me look back, and my friends were like, I'm so glad you did that, because we have so many good memories. And it generated so much content that I now use for my own fiction, which is now making me money. So it's like this long journey, that is such a beneficial exercise. And even if you only use storytelling at work, which I teach classes on that at my job, like even if you just know your own story for your resume or telling stories at work, it's such a human tool. And some people don't know they have it sometimes. So what you do on your show, what I love, is you're breaking it down for people, because once you know what you didn't know, you're so much more powerful, right?
100%. And that is something that is an interesting and unique challenge to Star Trek Adventures as well, which I only realized when I started doing Off My Bridge, because there are 4 fundamental story lines driving stories in my head anyway.
Oh, I want to hear this.
Well, right or wrong, I don't know, but I haven't yet found stuff that breaks the mold. There's 4 majors and then there's 2 minors. And the minors are what Star Trek leans heavily into by its nature. So not Star Trek Adventures 2 as a role-playing system, but just Star Trek as a genre. So the 4 is thwarting, delivering, collecting, and discovering, right? So you have to go and stop something. You have to thwart. You have to stop something from happening. You have to deliver something and make sure that it gets there safely. You have to get somewhere to collect a thing. So it's the journey about getting there. And then discovering is you need to go find something out. Star Trek doesn't really use those very often, because very seldom does it use that. Deep Space Nine used thwarting in the Dominion Wars. You have to go and take back Chintaka, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. So there was some clear objectives. But hardcore Star Trek at its base, you kind of go, well, isn't it discovering? Well, no, because discovering doesn't imply understanding. You're just finding out, right, what's going on. The 2 side ones are the investigation / murder mystery and negotiation. And so the investigation murder mystery is really where Star Trek sits. Most of the time, some mystery is happening and the characters or the crew are trying to figure it out. But when you are trying to construct this as an adventure, as a creator, with thwarting, delivering, discovering, and collecting, there's a certain amount of leeway that you have, because you kind of go, okay, well, I need to get from point A to point B, or the big bad has these stats and the rest will just work itself out. With the investigating, you as the DM have to know every single step that has transpired, because whatever angle the players are coming at, you need to have provable events that have happened that fit into your timeline. So it's a lot more constructed narrative and thinking that you have to do, but it's so much more rewarding as a creator to have gone, well, actually it was the Ferengi who had done this in the background and they were manipulating this, and that's why the Iridians did that. And this trail of breadcrumbs, if your players are following that trail, sometimes they'll go in the wrong direction and they'll go off in different tangents and things. That's role-playing. But when they get to the conclusion and they're like, oh, it was the Ferengi and it was because of this, and you're like, ha, 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 yes.
Let's talk about this. This is great. I'm glad you're saying this, because how do you construct this then without railroading, right? Because that happens so often. We have some, give you an example. We have something on my crew where we play, we call it chicken bucket. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, but basically if they're going in the wrong direction, we say chicken bucket. And it's kind of a clue like, okay, you're fixating on the wrong thing. You're fixating too much. And the origin of it came from one of our players, Michael Freeman. And what they would do when they used to play, I think it was some sort of investigative, modern day type investigative game. If his detectives or players were looking for something and say, hey, these keys are important, he would say, well, yeah, but you found those keys in a chicken bucket. And that was kind of like the thing, like, and so they had chicken buckets all through their little universe, and we adopted it. So how do you do that, Guy? What's the way you can? What's your advice on how you would construct something to chicken bucket them to get them back in the right direction?
One of the things that is synonymous with Star Trek is the phrase "speed of warp." Right? The speed of warp is variable in Star Trek. It's going to take Voyager 70,000 years to get from the one point of the Delta Quadrant back into the Alpha Quadrant. So why doesn't it take 70,000 years to get from Cardassia to the Kronos? Because they're on opposite ends of the Alpha and Beta Quadrants, right? The Klingons can literally invade Cardassia in a matter of weeks or hours. So it's the speed of warp. So Star Trek has always looked at time as something that happens to other universes. And we need to create the illusion of pressure. You have to solve this mystery before the missile is fired into the sun to destroy the gravitational, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet somehow there seems to always be enough time for whatever is happening to happen. So it's a bit of a balancing act. That's where things like threat and momentum are really useful, right? As well as extended tasks, because they allow you to apply that sort of, yes, this stuff is happening, this countdown is happening. And I was literally running a game last night where my guys were running around a mining colony trying to get to the hidden room that they're convinced we're doing something, but they did not have a security officer with them, and their escape plan involved dressing up in the costumes of the aliens and then crawling through the ducts and hoping no one noticed. Well, my guys were just doing an extended task where they were trying to figure out what had happened to the PCs, right? And so that timer was ticking down. But because it was, let me just roll 2d20, well, someone got a success or two successes, or I'm just going to get some threat there. Thank you very much. The players didn't really know what was going on, but something was happening, and I was able to keep track of that quite nicely. So when it comes to chicken bucket problems, you are not railroading the players if you are saying to them, you detect a tachyon burst out of a subspace rift. You're giving them an event, right? What they choose to do with that is entirely up to them. And if they go in the opposite direction, they go, okay, that's great, but we're actually going to go for a refit at Starbase 24. We care nothing about this. That's absolutely fine. Or if you go and you head in that direction. But because you understand that the tachyon burst was from a ship that had been stuck in the subspace for 150 years and someone was trying to send a message, well, what are they going to do if no one responds? They'll just send another one, right? Or they'll try a more powerful burst message. So now, whilst the crew are heading in the different direction, another subspace rift opens up and an even more powerful tachyon burst comes out. And if the players at this point are not going, wait a second, we need to look at this, well, that's fine. They will arrive at the starbase, and some Klingon will say, oh, my ship was damaged by a subspace tachyon burst.
Or you spin threat, and that tachyon burst drops them out of warp.
Or it drops them out of warp, right? So there are tools, right?
Right? Yeah.
At the same time, you're going, but that is just railroading. You are forcing them to accept what's going on. In theory, yes. But I would counter by saying your players are not following the social contract of role-playing.
There you go.
The social contract of role-playing says the GM is there to provide you with an event to interact with. If you are purposefully not interacting with these events, that's on you. That's not the GM now having to try and shoehorn you into a story. And again, this also depends on what kind of contract you've set up. Are you doing GM-led narratives, or are you doing player-based narratives as your base for the game?
Yeah, that's a good point, because we have players on our group who say, this is what I want my arc to be. And so I take that into consideration as I write.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
that's what, for those who are wondering what those contracts look like, each player during session 0 should have a chance to say what kind of game they want. And if you can, as a GM, you try to get it all in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is also about realizing that there are players for tables and there are players for other tables. And if you've got players who are fairly passive and don't necessarily want to take the lead, I would never recommend that they play a command position, because it's not going to be fun for anybody. Whereas other role-playing systems, yeah, you can be someone who's passive, but if you've got all of the numbers built up, you can still deal damage in the situation. Star Trek has a very specific requirement for a command structure. Whether you're playing Federation or we're just a bunch of rebel marquee flying around, or sure, someone is still going to have to make a call at some point.
In your experience, have you had different groups for different purposes? Like, meaning, one of the things I'm finding with Star Trek, it's the diversity of type of games you can play, that I'm starting to form different groups for different purposes with different people in it who want different things out of games. Right. Is that what you've done historically?
I haven't found that just within Star Trek specifically. I'm still looking, I'm still sort of playing with different groups and things, but I have definitely found that within other role-playing spaces. I've been part of tables where I'm like, I don't actually want to play in this game anymore, because your focus is min-maxing. Your focus is story. Your focus is personal growth, which is also not something that I like to move forward, right? Or I like to do this, or I like to do that. And so it is important to realize that there are times where you are just not aligned in terms of what you're looking for. Don't try and force it. And yes, sit down and say, hey guys, I was really expecting us to do traditional Star Trek, and the Prime Directive doesn't exist in your world, and the Federation is shoot first, and what's going on here? This is not what I was looking for. Can we change it up? Or you're entitled to say that, but everybody else is entitled to go, no, this is what we want. We want this, whatever, right? So yeah, it's important to take that into account.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's read all kinds of stories online from gamers that are like, I'm in this horrible game and I hate it, but I can't leave. Like, I can't leave. It's like, well, of course you can leave. If it's not working for you and it's not serving you, ask them to change it up or go find another group. It's okay. There's tons of gamers out there online and in real space, and it makes me sad when I read this and they're like, maybe they're in an isolated place and they only have one group to play with, but that group wants to do one specific thing, and if it's just not fitting what they want to do and they don't want to flex, or they can't flex, and the other group members can't flex either, then it's really hard to read that. Right? Yeah. Which I guess is why, one reason why solo RPGs have gotten more popular, because then you can just kind of go do your own thing and not have to rely on a group of people that may not fit your
style,
tendencies and personalities. Like I know my group in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had 2 members of our group who were super hardcore min-maxers, and that's what they wanted to optimize literally everything about the game. And the rest of us were all writers and actors and theater, and we were all into the character interactions and the growth and stuff. And we could care less about XP. We could care less about rolling, dice in a given session. And it's like, very clearly we were butting heads like every session. It's like, okay, we just need to change this up somehow. We need to either have 2 separate groups playing 2 different games entirely, or we just need to go our separate ways. And that was hard, right? It was hard to get to that point, but you just need to have those conversations. Session 0, or what was it, Michael? It was Connor, right, who told us that session zero
never ends. Yeah. Session zero continues is his
conversation with your players.
Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
I think it's important to dig in on that too, because I think there's something that many players don't do. They don't ask the GM, "Are you having fun?" The GM becomes almost a service position, where we're there to build games for them and spend exhaustive hours and construct these amazing worlds, and then we don't get to have fun. So you have to be really careful for that too. So I think, the gaming community is evolving right now. It doesn't look like it used to be. It's more socially aware, generally coming in a little bit more. I find it a lot more empathetic than what I grew up with us grognards, and I'm loving it. But that means we also have to mature socially and with emotional intelligence when we're putting our games together. There has to be a level of emotional intelligence. If not, you can play with a bunch of low EQ people. That's fine. That's your thing. But everyone should be asking, what are you looking to get out of here? And what sacrifices can I make and negotiate so everyone gets a little bit of what they want out of the game? If not, people cannot get butt hurt if you're like, I'm going to go play somewhere. It's like if I'm going back to what you were saying, Guy, if I suck at basketball, Michael sucks at basketball. So Michael's not going to join a basketball game, but he'll see the football thing going on. I'm going to go do some football or some track. Right. And the basketball people don't get hurt over it. They don't get hurt over it. It's like, oh, Michael's not basketball. He's football. And it's the same thing with these gaming tables. I'm not meant for every table, and not every story is meant for every player either. And I think that's an important, put emphasis on that. Right?
Yeah, I agree. The one thing to add to that is that the role-playing space is an unusual hobby, because it's a hobby, it's perceived as an entertaining activity. Right? Which has no real rules, and it has no conventions, and there's no guidelines or best general practices. Unlike sport, where there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? So if you're playing tennis, you will arrive dressed in tennis clothing, you'll have a tennis racket, you'll understand the rules of tennis. But you can have someone arrive to do role playing, and they haven't got dice correctly, or don't have any dice, they don't know the rules, they sit down and they're expecting to have the same experience as a professional tennis player would sit down and expect to have, right? Because we don't yet see it as you can get better at role playing the more you do it. That means you can put in effort, and if you put in effort, you're going to get better at it. So you must appreciate some people have put in a lot of effort, and so some folks are role playing for just a social hangout. And they're role playing by accident. Oh yeah, let's kill some elves, or let's go hunt down some whatevers, and they're not invested. Whereas others are invested, and they really want their character to grow, and they're the storyteller. So there's a whole lot of different levels of alignment that need to happen. I'm
wondering with both of you, both Jim and Guy, like I'm finding I'm leaning into using RPG as workshop writing for myself. A writing workshop to understand other personalities, other viewpoints, so that when I'm writing my own material, if I'm not emoting or feeling emotionally connected to the characters like I am in RPG, I'm like, oh, this is not hitting the mark. I don't know how both of you are. Do both of you use your RPG to now inform your professional work? Jim's thinking this is my professional work. He's in project.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, it's hard to pull the threads out and separate them, because, like, I've got the theater background, and I got the writing background, and I got the RPG background, and they all have blended together in such a way that, like, story is story. And RPGs are a way to hit all those different marks, where I'm figuring out character interactions, I'm figuring out plot, I'm figuring out character motivation. Like, why is this character doing this thing? What matters to them? It's not, they're just not going through the steps and the motions and making it happen. They're like, why do they want this? Why do they not want this? And as a game master, it's great to kind of pick at those threads for other players to say, okay, this player has brought this character to the game with their character sheet and their focuses and their talents and their traits or whatever. That means that they're interested in these certain things. Probably, maybe they've invested some time and created a backstory for that character. What kind of threads as a game master and a storyteller can I pull on from that character to see what happens. Like, what does the player want me to do with those threads? And as a veteran game master, like, I like to do that. I really like to do that subplot type of stuff, where if someone's got if they had to do a throwaway character in their backstory, you bet I'm going to find a way to pull it into the story just to see how they react to it. Is this something that they want to explore in the game? So absolutely, story wise, like when I'm developing my own novels and short stories and stuff, I'm always thinking about RPG. That's only because I'm also always thinking about theater and storytelling and everything else that I've had in my entire life. That's all kind of blended together. Guy, I don't know what your perspective is like in that respect.
I echo what you have said. Absolutely. I think that and I'm just smiling because the one player that I had last night was using the values of their character to definitely play the character as the character was described, but would have these reactions of, oh, no, I can't do this because my value is the crew come first. So actually, I got to do that. Or do I go against it? But then why, so the seeing that when it comes to then applying it to professional stuff, it's so powerful to be able to step back and say, hang on, remember, you got to apply this thing. And what is this thing doing to the character? Do you have to apply it as a sledgehammer? No. Sometimes it can just be a slight moral dilemma, and then off we go. And I think that when you look at Star Trek TV series, you kind of go, well, it would have been nice if the writers over the seasons had some key words for the characters more than what they did. Because some of the actions that the characters took, you're like, what? Where does that come from? Where's the justification? Where does the motivation come from? And it's just because the writers needed a character to fill in a space. They're like, oh, we'll just use so-and-so. They're available or whatever. So, but yeah, absolutely. Informing decisions, 100%.
Yeah. And that's great. I mean, I love to hear that. I think it's evolving, as you get older, many of us have less time to play because other life happens. And so to me, I cherish that time of being able to play RPG, and I want to get something out of it too. I'm not going to be in a game I don't enjoy, for sure. And if I am enjoying it, I love to know that, there's some sort of product, not even money making, just that I saw my skills improved over time, or there were wow moments. I'm like, ooh, I'm going to have to use that later on, kind of twists and turns. When it comes to your show, let's talk a little bit more about Off the Bridge. What's the format for people who haven't seen it before? What can they expect? What do they have to look forward to?
Wow. Okay. So at the moment, the format is very much foundational with regards to Star Trek Adventures 2. How do the rules work in my head? How do you then apply those rules as a game master specifically? Because there are a lot of things in Star Trek Adventures 2 which some of them are blatantly written. This is the thing. Do this thing, right? Reversals and reveals are a big example. But there's also a whole bunch of stuff which is not written, and it's not written because the book would be 1,000 pages long if it was, right? It's like the subtleties of, yes, but how do you actually enact that in a way that feels organic, or in a way that feels justified? And it's across the board, because there are so many layers to Star Trek Adventures, right? There's the role-playing, which is fantastic. And then there are the mechanics, and there are 2 layers to the mechanics, in my opinion. There are the mechanics that make the game work and that remain in game. So 2d20, task, rolling, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the metagame mechanics, which sit on top, which is momentum and threat. Because the players are negotiating that, not the characters. That's a player space. And so that's out of the character world. They don't even know that exists, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So it's looking at how do those interact with each other within the gaming space, and how do you manipulate and utilize all of them to increase your pace, decrease your pace, increase your tension, decrease your tension, create moments let certain things, so there's a wonderful complexity which is in the subtext of the basic stuff too. So that's what the channel is exploring. It's exploring all of that. And then I love Star Trek. So it's like, okay, cool. We're going to fix Star Trek Generations. And at the same time, we're going to turn it into an adventure using Star Trek, the rules. And how would this look and what would this look like? So sometimes it's an episode just of fun and fantasy going, hey, this movie sucked. Let's fix it. How do we do that? What do we look at from a narrative perspective? What did they do wrong?
Oh, that's cool.
And how do we apply that as GMs to try and learn from those mistakes as well? Because hindsight's 20/20. But there are some mistakes that you go, really shouldn't have been made even then, because it was breaking the mythology of the established world space, or it was completely against character, or et cetera, et cetera.
Since you like TNG, can you do that with Code of Honor, please?
Oh my goodness. Gosh, Code of Honor. I haven't watched that one in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but you look at some of the worst episodes, right? And you go, how do we change those from worst episodes into cool, fun side things? An upcoming episode that I've done is on the Deep Space Nine episode. It's gone on my head. Move Along Home, which is the Wadi from the Gamma Quadrant who trap the 4 characters in Chula. And when you watch the episode, you're like, what were they? I understand what they were thinking, but why didn't they follow any of the rules that they should have been, and then you start to break it down. And then when you rework it to fit, suddenly it actually, I think, would be a really cool adventure to play. But you've got to rework it. And it also only works because of the game mechanics of adventures with supporting cast. That was one of the things that blew my mind. I was like, this is such a cool concept. And then that allows you to do a lot of stuff that the TV shows were doing, which you can't do in other role-playing systems. You can literally have cutaways to other stuff happening that the main characters would not know about, but the players know about it. So that gives them metagame knowledge. So how do you manipulate that metagame knowledge that they're not giving it to their main character, because that's bad metagaming, but they as the player have got it in the back of their head and it's creating more tension, drama, and angles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I mean, that's what I love doing. Yeah, so that's what's on the channel, and it's still very, very new. So we take every episode is like, hey, tell me what you want to know more about. What are we deep diving into? What are we looking at? And stuff. So yeah, very exciting, very, very exciting. I've got content planned. That was my big breakthrough moment when I was deciding to do it. Was I said, okay, let me just work out what I could talk about on Star Trek Adventures 2 on a YouTube channel, and I've got content planned until December. I'm like, okay, that took me 10 seconds. I'm so excited. I can go for the next 3 years on this stuff, right? So anyway,
that's awesome. I'm so excited to hear that you're getting into the levels and the depth and the mechanics and all the different levers that you can pull, because we tried to write a lot of that into the Game Master's Guide, right? Because like at that point the game was 5 years mature. Nathan and I were like, okay, what do we do next? How about more advice for the players, more advice for the game masters? And I really wanted him to pick into his brain and like pull out all that conceptual stuff that he was using to develop the game, right? It's like, how do you translate that into text so that somebody else can read it and go, oh, here's how to expand my level of understanding of the game. And of course, we only have so much time. We only have so many products that we can release. We only have so much time to write blog posts or do videos like this. Like, we just don't have the ability to do more of that kind of stuff. So I'm just super excited that you are going to be diving into that, because I think it's going to be a super, super positive thing for gamers and players to check out and really, really dig into the depths of the game system so that you can come up with even more cool stuff. Awesome. So Guy, I have one comment for you and then one question, and then I think we'll head into like our gratitude and stuff. And I'm going to go back just a little bit on the comment, because Michael did a great job of jumping ahead and I didn't have a chance to get this question in, but you mentioned your game yesterday had a player who was agonizing over what to do because of their character, right? I just wanted to comment and say I love doing that as a player, especially when I've been playing Pendragon, because Pendragon, your character has a set of beliefs that are in opposition to each other, whether they're brave or cowardly, or they're frugal, or they're spendy or whatever. And it's a way for a player to play a character who isn't them, right? You like to think that as a player, I control this character, I am this character, I'm going to do what this character does, right? But in Star Trek, none of us have gone to Starfleet Academy. None of us have gone through the Klingon, military whatevers. We're not we don't have PhDs in science. Some of us might certainly, but like I don't. But I still play scientists. I still play doctors. I love being able to say, well, okay, in this situation, me, Jim, I might do this, but what would my character do? And I think values is a great way to do that. In fact, I almost wish that Star Trek had an even more robust system of balance of points, like Pendragon, where you can say, oh, I don't know if I would do this, or maybe you get into a situation where you're like, you just don't know what your character would do, and then you roll some dice. It's like, oh, and that's why I like the Captain's Log probability table, Michael, because sometimes in Star Trek Adventures, I'll be like, I don't know what my character would do. I'm just going to roll on the probability table and just like let it happen. That's kind of the gameable element. I think that is really fun. But I just want to see if you had anything to reflect on that, and then I'll ask my last question.
Yes. So on the values, this is again where it's about you as the DM. You really are a Q in the sense of you are running the game world, but you can see your players are struggling with where they need to go, or you can see that they are unsure as to what they should do next. You have at your disposal this idea, well, you have determination. And so, not with that particular character, because he really got into the whole Trek system, but with other players, I was going, so you don't have any determination. Determination is really cool to have. What are your values? What would you go against? Or how could, is there one in there that you could go against? And what would that look like? And how would your character then do that? So it became a bit of a prompt that I'm not telling you how to play your character, and I'm not telling you what decisions you should make. I'm just giving you something to look at and go, oh, yeah, actually, I have this leave no stone unturned. Well, maybe I should actually leave no, or what did we miss? So it's a little prompt in there, isn't there? And those two systems are not, you wouldn't say necessarily that values and determination are immediately linked, but driving for more determination or to spend determination has often led to character discovery that no one was even thinking about. So, yeah, it's really, and I also hear about, don't know what my character should do. What should I do? Should it be a probability thing? Should it not be a probability thing? That's a tough one. I'm not sure I'm happy with people going, okay, let's roll the dice and see. But I certainly think that when you tie it back to determination, it's going, well, you haven't got any. Try get some back. So what would your character do? In this case, your character is going to go in opposition. Think about that. Look at those scenarios. Are those interesting scenarios as a port of call?
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. I love it. Great stuff. Last question for you from me then. I don't know, Michael, if you have any other questions, but
I do, but we have to keep a time limit, so I'm going to have to have him back another time.
We'll have to get you back, Guy. My last question, just really briefly, I was really excited. I was sad when I heard that you were, finishing up with How to Be a Great GM, but that you were moving on to the new Star Trek channel. But you also mentioned that you were starting another channel completely divergent from Star Trek or RPGs, and I just that particular channel got me really excited too, because it was right in my wheelhouse, one of my many wheelhouses. And I was just wondering if you wanted to, just plug that channel briefly and talk a little bit about that, and then we'll move into our gratitude.
Sure. So the other channel is called Guide Adventures, which if you say quickly is Guided Adventures, or I did adventures, or I have guided you through an adventure. And that is just my other passion, which is history, because history will do all of the hard work for you in terms of storytelling. if you just ask it, hey, give me a cool story history, and history go, well, sure, where would you like me to start? I got 10,000 years worth of it. And so that is a series where I choose a historical space. So it could be the first month here of January. It's a local ruin, an old abbey, which you go, oh, there are thousands of ruined abbeys in England. It's not anything special. You go, but this one happened to contain a mummified heart in a lead-lined cask that was buried in the side of the wall of an abandoned chapel. And you go, what? And you're like, yep, it was found in 1939. England was at war. And everyone went, there's a heart and a thing, right? So it looks at these historical spaces. It unpacks the history that happened there in a very informal kind of way. And then we turn all of that history, we turn that into an adventure. And this is more fantasy stuff. This is more Dungeons and Dragons kind of stuff. And so it ignores history in terms of you not choosing one historical event. You are building a whole bunch of options for yourself from all of the historical events. So with this particular abbey, it's got 800 years worth of history. And so there's some stuff at the beginning that's quite cool. Then there's some stuff in the 1600s, which was completely arbitrary. King James I wanted to develop a local silk trade, so he didn't have to buy silk from China. He planted 10,000 trees, and they were the wrong tree. And you're like, how does that turn into an adventure, right? Well, it in itself isn't. But when you start to take all of the things, and there's 3 ghosts that are supposed to live there, you then start to get this smorgasbord of stuff. And you go, right, now how do I tie these together to create a story? And you end up with this, I think, pretty cool adventure. The map is already made because the abbey is there and you just have to sort of map it out. But I also talk about how you would map it out so that it is more useful for role-playing than just as a historical record. Because castles and things, although they're real, they are awful for fantasy. They do not work for fantasy. They don't work for adventures, for role-playing and that kind of stuff. I mean, Hollywood knew this and has known this since Errol Flynn started running around his castles. They're not cinematic at all. But anyway, so that's guided adventures, and we do one a week, one episode a week, taking us through the four steps of creating an adventure. Yeah.
Wow. So it's just creating the adventure, not playing the adventure.
Correct. It's just creating the adventure, throwing the adventure out. We write it up. I talk about the tools you need in order to actually create something that, if you wanted to publish it, this is how, these are the things that you could use, tools you can use. And then, the adventure is published, and patrons get the adventure at the end of each month. So, yeah.
That's super cool. I can't wait. Yeah. I'm just so excited because like Star Trek, history are 2 of my big wheelhouses, right? And you're hitting both of them. And I'm like, this is perfect. And now the only other thing you could possibly do would be to take, like, here's how to write the adventure, and then just tangentially move that over, how to take all that content and start writing fiction, right? Here's how to write a story with plot and characters and dialogue and all that stuff. Because the transition from one to the other would be super, super easy. So yeah, maybe down the road.
Yeah, that is my nemesis, is writing the fiction novel. I've written 6 books on how to tell good stories and that sort of thing. My professional career, I've written lots of dramas and stuff for television, but that grail for me is writing the fiction book. Because I will start, I've got thousands that I started, but within a month I'm going, that story's interesting, but it's now played out in my head. I'm done. I'm moving on to the next one. I need us to get to the point where I can just do a brain dump and the computer just does it all for me. Because
we're getting there. Be careful.
I know. But it's my thoughts, right? Not the computer's thoughts, my thoughts, right? So yeah, that's my personal life goal. I'll get there.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. I just love hearing the creative processes. Super cool. All right, so I think we'll wrap it up now and head into what we call our gratitude, where we just we find different people in the world that we want to be grateful for and thank you. Michael, why don't you go first, and then Guy, and then I'll wrap it up, and then we'll move on. So Michael, what's your gratitude for today?
I have a lot. I mean, and then Guy inspires more gratitude of things I forgot to be thankful for. I'm going to actually be thankful. This will air after the Sentience Kickstarter has succeeded. There's a Kickstarter being done by one of my fellow writers. He writes for Star Trek Adventures, Al Spader, and he started his 2D20 Modifius, 2D20 licensed the game. You know, he got licensed from Modifius, the 2D20 system. And he did a Kickstarter and it succeeded in 3 hours. It was really inspiring to see that. And it's not only just Al, but working on teams with you, Jim, with Troy Mepians, who is also doing Ashland, with Aaron Paulier, who's a writer on, but like, and then being able to, you know, meet people like Guy also, and everyone sharing tidbits of what makes a great story and what captivates people. That's where my gratitude goes. I tell people, if you want to be a writer, hang out with writers. All right. That's going to really inspire you. So if you're out there trying to do something and you're the only one of your friends writing, you need to add more friends to your collective. And they don't have to write the same genre. Actually, I find it better if they don't, if possible, sometimes, because you get ideas that you can pull in that your genre doesn't own. So again, to all the writers, writer groups, and people who inspire me, thank you.
There we go. Okay. Off the top of my head, I would say someone that deserves more gratitude than they get, I think, is an author by the name of Joe Dever, or Dever, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Joe Dever, I've always known him as. And Joe Dever was a British author who wrote a series of choose your own adventure books called the Lone Wolf series. And he wrote 23 books, which were instrumental in my upbringing of understanding rules, of understanding mechanics, and of creating a character over time rather than just in a single novel. And I read all of his books as a teenager. I had them all. I collected them all. I played them all. And then he released a role-playing system based on the books. And I had the opportunity of reviewing it, and I did the review, and he sent me an email just thanking me for the review. And I got to chat to him, and we had this back and forth, and he just openly shared so much stuff and was just such a positive person and so caring and giving that it was just so touching to meet someone who has this legacy, and yet they will still talk to a little nobody who comes from a different continent, a different hemisphere. And he was really inspirational to go, hey, no one is too big to share. So share. So I would say Joe Dever for now.
That's awesome. And I think on a similar theme to both of you, I want to thank everybody, like Guy and like other YouTubers and other reviewers, other writers, other people who are passionate about RPG, passionate about storytelling, and passionate about just like having fun together. That not only are you just talking about it, but you're also sharing it and you're enabling other people to go do it, right? Like, writing something and to say, here's how to be a great GM. Somebody gets that, maybe they'll find one nugget of gold out of that entire book, but that makes them go off and running and do something amazing with it. Like, mission accomplished, right? Your job is done. You did what you set out to do. So like everybody who's out there, sharing your passion for storytelling, whether it's an RPG space or fiction space or whatever, keep doing it, because you don't know who you're touching, especially in this great big internet world. There's millions of people looking at our content that we're never going to meet. They're never going to talk to us. They're just going to, take what they need and go be awesome. And it's just so like whatever switch occurred in you to be like, okay, I'm a gamer and I'm having fun. Oh, wait, I'm going to go start a YouTube channel and share this knowledge with somebody, right? Like a lot of people don't make that switch. But so for the enablers like you and us that do that, like, oh, I have some information I could share that, maybe it'll help someone do things better or do their thing better or more effectively or whatever. Thank you for doing that. They I really appreciate it. Like I'm sponging this off of everybody, and hopefully I'm giving back and doing well. But I'm grateful for people like you that do that. So thank you for that. And thank you for being on the show. And then also thank you to all the fans. Without the fans, we wouldn't be here talking about second edition Star Trek. We wouldn't be talking about any of this. So grateful to the fans who have been with us for gosh, 9 years now. And, sky's the limit. We'll see what happens next. But grateful to have you all along for the ride. So that's it for me.
Wonderful. And Guy, thank you for coming on our show. It's like wonderful having superstars of the internet with us.
Thank you for reaching out to me. When you wrote to me, I was like, oh, I must have done something right. If you guys are writing out to me, then that's, either that or I was expecting, okay, you have screwed up so many of the rules. You are banned from playing Star Trek Adventures ever again.
Isn't it funny how that is? Because
badge, you're done.
It's so funny how we all view each other, because to me, and I think Jim feels the same way, it's like, wow, Guy's coming on our show. He actually said yes. Like, that's so funny how we view each other. It's so great. All right. Well, until next time, we are going to definitely have you back. So great to make kinship with you now. And IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well. We'll see you all next time.